All right, welcome to Modern Mondays here at Guardian Games in Portland, Oregon. I'm Travis Cooper, and I'm hanging out with,
Tim Chan.
and we're watching The Rock versus Haakon Lompox. So a lot of, I would imagine, blue-green value cards in both of these decks. One of them is going to want to utilize a graveyard with Haakon to cast some knights from the graveyard, and probably some self-mill in there too. Any thoughts on the matchup, Tim?
It's going to be a very grinding matchup since they both have discard. Though the Lone Pox deck, I think, is going to be an outgrind the deck, unless the Rock can put a threat early on. Because right now we can see Kurt here is short on one land, to really start enabling Haakon and any knights. Because he plays, I believe, Knight of Autumn, Knight of the Reliquary, so they're all 3 mana, are all his threats.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, and it looks like both players kept their 7, and Michael starting off usually with a traditional black-green turn 1 play. Because we're modern, that's going to be an Inquisition of Kozilek or Thoughtseize. And looks like the Inquisition is taking Collective Brutality, so perhaps Michael has something like a Dark Confidant as a follow-up play and wanting to protect that.
he also could be just trying to protect from getting Haakon into his graveyard, because Haakon cannot be cast from hand. He has to be casted from the graveyard.
I imagine Kurt's deck is also going to have some number of Liliana of the Veil or other discard outlets to put the Haakon in the graveyard. And we're just getting a Raven's Crime with a random discard there. Oh, Raven's Crime himself. There we go.
So he still got there. He still got there. But did he hit the third land, though?
Kind of card disadvantage on the face there for Kurt, but hopefully going to leverage that in the later game to recur some creatures.
Because another card that's in Sand is Nameless Inversion that actually has all types, so it is also a Knight card, a recastable removal spell.
And Michael's turn to play his Field of Ruin into a Collective Brutality for the bad duress mode.
Okay, ooh. Kurt's in a little trouble, but Mike didn't play a colored source, so he might be also in trouble without the green source. That's almost all his creatures.
And it's a Verdant Catacombs and Pass for Kurt. Both players setting up.
Okay.
And we do get that green source and Treetop Village for Michael. I would imagine if Kurt's fetching here, he either has a white spell that he knows he's going to be able to cast and drew the land. Usually, if you only have 2 lands, you're wanting to hit your 3rd land drop, you're going to leave more lands in your library to give yourself potential draws.
I'm wondering if Mike had that Treetop Village and just decided to go for the Collective Brutality instead, playing the Treetop the turn before.
Alright, there is that 3rd land, and a Ghost Quarter, and a Haakon's on the battlefield. Have you ever played against this card, Tim?
Briefly, and it's very scary, I'll say, because I used to play a Lone Pox deck, I don't know if you recall, years ago, but the creatures are bigger threats. I think the synergy is actually surprisingly really good here.
It does seem like we might find a copy of Nihil Spellbomb in this Rock deck. A lot of decks are playing some form of main deck graveyard interaction, usually with the Spellbomb, because it's an artifact that will add to Tarmogoyf's power and toughness. That could become a problem.
Oh.
And something like a Scavenging Ooze also could be an issue, but we don't have an untapped green source for Michael to leverage that Ooze this turn.
So, without another second green source, Kurt's is probably going to cast Nameless Inversion here to kill the Scavenging Ooze. Yeah. Yep. Here's that value already coming to play.
It seems like Michael's just picking up on that Nameless Inversion is...
Yeah.
And do you think Kurt's playing any hard removal, like a Dismember or a Fatal Push?
I think for the synergy, just because seeing Nameless Inversion, I believe he's at least main deck. That's probably the only card he's playing. Maybe Damnation, because you know he can board wipe, clean up, and just play another Haakon and just start repeating all the creatures.
We get a Knight of the Reliquary cast on the graveyard, and it looks like it's going to be at least a 3/3 Knight. I see a Verdant Catacomb hanging out over there on Kurt's side.
He can Ghost Quarter and make it one of his own lands and make it a 5/5. If he decides to double block that Coif. Because again, he doesn't mind the Knight or either really creature dies.
Seems in this situation, unless Michael draws another way to interact with the graveyard or to kill Haakon, that Kurt's just going to have an endless stream of jump blockers.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Pulse on the Knight, and Tarmogoyf is going to come in for 5.
I think in this case, Kurt just should just let it go and start racing. Oh, okay.
It seems like the Knight does add a bunch of value, just being able to fetch up lands. I'm assuming Kurt plays some kind of creature lands.
Well, if you waited one more turn, I'm going to assume he plays one Bujuko Bog, especially with the amount of Knights he's playing as well. He could have shrunk that Goyf, or next turn, he could have cast Haakon and another Knight of Reliquary and just start racing and not care about that Goyf, because he's got enough life to survive for 3 turns.
Alright, and then we're going to see that Haakon coming back from the graveyard, probably the Knight as well. And we have the same board as we did last turn, but Michael was down a spell for that. Michael may be contemplating how to navigate this game to give himself a out for potential victory.
Well, do you think he plays more than 2 oozes, or like you mentioned, maybe a couple spell bombs with the current meta?
I could see it being if you're just in black-green up to 3 uses, there's a lot of graveyard decks out there now. We have Arclight Phoenixes, KCIs. The control decks are utilizing their graveyard as well, so Scavenging Ooze is probably at a high point in Modern right now. And we get a Raven's Crime from Kurt, and Michael's discarding a Thoughtseize, which seems like in the late game is going to be a pretty useless card against this Haakon deck.
So Kurt now, with one active Knight, can easily outsize the Goyf at this point in the game. I expect he probably will get a fetch land, crack it, and each Knight will be a 5/5. And potentially with the Ghost Core making a 7/7s and start just forcing the blocks by Mike with his Goyf.
Does seem a bit of a interesting choice to play such a graveyard synergistic deck when there's so many graveyard decks out there and a lot of sideboard cards going for it.
Well, it's just also going to be personal preference, right? Myself, I tend to lean towards, green decks, while you yourself lends towards more blue decks, right? I mean, you see me play Kiki Chord, all sorts of janky green decks over the past few years. I mean, I think this deck is kind of sweet.
Deck is very sweet. It is. I think it is a bit of a liability to play a graveyard deck right now in Modern that isn't really aggressive or very fast. Something like I'd consider KCI to be a graveyard synergy deck, or Dredge, because you're going to end up running into sideboard cards that people have against those decks, which a lot of times those decks can ignore because they're killing you too quickly for it to matter. But it seems like this Haakon deck is wanting to really grind out the game, which seems sweet when it works, like right now.
Yeah, like I think it preys upon other mid-range decks, mainly possibly like other small creatures decks with Nameless Inversion. So I believe those Knights of the Reliquary are 6/6 right now.
And another Assassin's Trophy.
That must feel bad. I'm going to expect Mike to bring in any other oozes or spell bombs or surgical extractions post game 1.
A lot of times these black-green, even Jund, or Abzan decks now are playing a copy of Cletus, Trader of Get as well, which could be very good in this matchup. In fact, that could be a way to slog back into this game if Michael draws one.
But I think most lists I've seen, they don't generally play Cletus out of the main board though.
And the Knight comes back, and there's another Knight. And Kurt is going to gain 4 life off that one.
Just a little extra cushion when you got, a bunch of 7/7s on the battlefield.
And that's going to be enough for Michael. He's going to go to the sideboard, probably pull out some number of cards.
I bet you, with Kurt's deck knowing the meta, he potentially could. I think he's going to go 2 options: either be the Dredge strategy where you bring in anti-graveyard hate, or B, you kind of sideboard out and just become a normal mid-range Abzan deck, I possibly believe.
Okay, do you think there's more Planeswalkers in Kurt's sideboard for that transition, or what cards are you thinking?
You might see Lily of Last Hope, just because this is going to be a grinding matchup, and that's an easy win in a grinding matchup, even if the graveyard hate hits the board. Obviously, we know from Mike's side, he's going to bring any form of surgicals, any more oozes, or spell bombs. So Kurt, again, I'm not really sure. I'm still new to this deck, so I feel like 50-50, like I said. We're either going to see anti-graveyard hate or maybe a sideboard transformation.
The question is, on Michael's side, what are the anti-graveyard cards? If you're playing green-black, I imagine it's a choice of, are you going to play maybe 3 Leyline of the Voids? Are you going to play one of those and a couple surgical extractions and Nihil spell bombs? I would say right now in Modern, most decks are going to have somewhere between like 3 and 5 additional anti-graveyard cards in the sideboard. And Michael already has at least 2 in the main deck with those Scavenging Oozes.
Yep.
It was pretty brutal in that game 1.
Yeah.
When Michael had to use a removal spell just to see the night of the Reliquary recast the same turn. How do you feel about green-black as a choice right now in the modern meta as a whole?
I think it's all right. I don't think it's depending. Even if it, I think the issue with the rock or just green black in any green black mid range deck in general is some of the decks are just too fast, or just some of the limited interactions they have isn't enough. Like KCI is another example right now of just because you bring a little bit of artifact hate, they can usually navigate around it. Since most of them times they'll just bring Nature's Claim, any graveyard hate, they can kind of play around it as well. It's surprisingly a versatile deck. I think right now green black struggles against that, and also Tron is still its worst matchup. Even with Assassin's Trophies, I think about a month ago we actually had another matchup where we had the Rock playing against Tron. If they can't land an early threat, Tron's still going to hit Tron naturally.
Right, it does seem that there was the argument when Assassin's Trophy was first spoiled that with Field of Ruin the green-black decks would be able to have fair game against Tron, and it seems that they're lacking a little bit on that, like just aggressive creatures. You have your Tarmogoyfs, you have Scavenging Oozes, Dark Confidants, some 3-drops, maybe a couple 4-drops, and you just can't really close out the game sometimes. Karn will happen on 7 mana, or Wormcoil Engine will happen on 6.
What cards do you imagine Michael sideboarding out in this matchup? Do you think he'll take out the Disruption for sideboard hate?
I imagine you take out Hand Disruption because a lot of times Kurt is wanting those cards to be in the graveyard anyways.
Yep. I think both Inquisition and the Collective Brutality really backfired on him.
Yeah, it seems like I really enjoy mid-range decks. I think if a healthy format always has room for mid-range decks, but right now Modern does seem a little bit too quick for a traditional mid-range style like green-black based deck to be super successful all the time. I feel like if you could always be on the play, that might be different, but a lot of times the turn 2 Scavenging Ooze is going to be a little bit late for your graveyard interaction.
I think answers like Ooze are a little bit just too slow. I mean, Kurt's deck's a little bit slow, but in the general graveyard hate threat right now with, Dredge is still out there. You still have Phoenix. Like, they're just too fast. And I don't think Ooze is really the correct answer for those graveyard decks.
Well, it looks like Kurt is going down to 5 cards. At least they're going to be on the draw, so he'll be able to recoup one of those cards. It does feel like Kurt's version of the Abzan deck is going to be a little bit more resilient even when it comes to mulliganing, because once you get if you're able to get your engine going, you are just playing the same cards out of your graveyard over and over. Okay, a Verdant Catacombs to start things off for Michael, and no turn 1 play. And a fetch land on the other side of the table too.
Yeah, currently, I think I spot in Kurt's hand, there's nothing really much graveyard synergy going on in his hand. I think I saw a Knight of the Reliquary, an Abrupt Decay, and maybe a Night of Autumn, and 3 lands, or he played 1 and he has 2 more lands in hand. So he's kind of playing like right now his hand is really an old natural Abzan hand almost.
And Knight of Autumn is such a powerful card that recently got printed and is finding its way into all different types of decks.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a name. I think it's both humans and spirits sideboards, and the counters Collected Company deck now plays those as well on the sideboard. So pretty much any green-based creature deck now plays it as a sideboard.
So it seems that Michael did not have a turn 2 play either, so perhaps is holding up some kind of interaction with the graveyard, maybe some removal, or a lot of strong 3-drops. right. Got 2 mana for something? Maybe not. Maybe not. Oh, well, there's an instant speed card that Michael was thinking of casting for 2 mana.
Thinking Assassin's Trophy? Maybe he's trying Assassin's Trophy Surgical or something. Because I'm not really sure what other instant cast speed he had there.
Alright, is Kurt going to have a 3-drop here? And shocking in a Godless Shrine.
Let's see, a Night Reliquary? Okay. So maybe he did take out the Haakon package and kind of reduce the amount of graveyard interaction his deck has.
So we had a 4/4 Knight that is now hitting the graveyard.
Okay.
And we're getting an distraction on that Night of the Reliquary.
Take a look at Kurt's hand. No, it looks like he kept the Haakon. It just...
Alright, looks like we have 2
wow.
Haakons, a Nameless Inversion, and is that an Abrupt
Decay?
Decay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's kind of a rough keep, or he naturally drew into those 2 Haakons.
For those not in the know in chat, Haakon cannot be cast from your hand. It can only be cast in the graveyard. So that is definitely not where you want to have those hanging out. Michael perhaps kept the hand based on that surgical extraction. They've missed their 3rd land drop.
I think he might have
A couple
hit.
turns.
But I really did think...
And we got a Blooming Marsh into a Tarmogoyf.
ooh, this is going to be kind of harsh.
And that is going to be, we have Instance.
2/3? He actually can
And
kill it with the
lands.
Nameless Inversion. Wow, I'm surprised he ran it out unless he's got something else he can pitch to. Or maybe he's baiting a Nameless Inversion for another surgical extraction.
Seems like if you had Surgical, that's not, maybe not the card they'd want to hit with it.
Yeah.
Kurt's probably thinking, what what kind of trap am I getting ready to fall into right now? And it works. Perhaps Michael also just has a lot of Tarmogoyfs in their hand and want to get one out there so that the other ones can grow.
Mike also, I think I saw Liliana of the Veil. I'm wondering if he's holding back because he knows he has Kurt has 2 Haakons in hand also.
I could see the only plus of playing a Lily when you know your opponent has 2 Haakons is either not doing anything with it, which is always an option that people overlook, or to plus it, and then if you have a surgical extraction in your hand.
Yeah.
And Kurt with passing the turn. And Michael deploying the Tireless Tracker.
Ooh.
Alright, here we get a clue.
So, like we saw game 1, if Kurt top decks a Raven's Crime, we could potentially... Oh, yeah, there's the Abrupt Decay.
Michael knew that was in there, probably just trading that tracker for a random card with a clue.
I think oh, is that a Smallpox? In Kurt's hand? I think he just drew a Smallpox. So he's going to be able to play Smallpox, discard Haakon, and then play Haakon this turn.
So each player is going to lose a life, discard a card, sacrifice a creature, and sacrifice a land. So I bet Kurt's going to discard that Haakon. And here comes Haakon. And right now it's just Nameless Inversion that Kurt can use to cast from the graveyard.
I think.
Okay, we've got a judge question here where Michael is wondering if they have priority after smallpox resolves before Kurt is able to cast the Haakon. And I believe the correct answer to this is no, because there has to be passing of priority, and Kurt is going to retain priority in between resolving spells.
I think the second part Michael also asked for was, can he do some type of graveyard interaction with Haakon being cast, but once you start casting it, I believe it's removed from the graveyard on the stack, so it's no longer part of the graveyard either.
Okay, seems that the judge confirmed that that was how the rules worked.
So it does seem like Mike does have another surgical. So okay, we're going to see a -2 by Lily and probably surgical on the Haakon.
And there we go. That was a little bit telegraphed there. And Kurt's just packing it up at that point. Doesn't think they're going to be able to outgrind the deck. Perhaps noticing there's only 14 minutes left on the clock, and thinking they're going to have a better shot on the play. I'm curious if you're that synergistic with your graveyard. I wonder if Kurt has surgical extractions of his own to bring in to maybe negate an opposing surgical extraction.
The only card I think I could tell that Kurt brought in was the Abrupt Decay, so maybe he assumed Mike's only graveyard hate was the Scavenging Oozes, possibly. Because I would have expected maybe for Kurt to actually bring in something like Thoughtseizes to handle with the surgical extractions.
Okay, both players all shuffled up. See if they've got a keepable 7. Michael considering it. Got a keeper for Kurt and a mulligan for Michael.
Do you think Michael's gonna go for an aggressive mulligan? Because we saw that Kurt's deck folds pretty hard after 2 surgicals.
It does seem like even just the first surgical is going to be really good. Michael's deck is designed to grind out other mid-range decks. With Liliana Veils, there's plenty of removal, so as long as they can just shut off that Haakon engine of continuously rebuying creatures, 1 surgical could probably put you ahead enough. But 2's always better than 1.
Yeah. I think Mike, when he was surgicaling the first time, saw the Lingering Souls.
I see a surgical, at least 1 surgical hanging out.
He put another card in front. I think it's a Swamp.
Okay, we've got a keeper and a scry to the bottom.
There was a Blooming Marsh he put on the bottom.
Starting off with the tap land here for Kurt. Yeah, that is a reader there.
I think that's the new Urborg art.
Oh,
yep,
okay.
That is the new Urborg art from Ultimate Masters.
Everyone's got swamps.
Yeah.
And a life from the loam.
Oh.
Starting to get that graveyard engine going with the dredge.
I think Kurt's missing a black source. Oh, he's got Urborg Growth, so it doesn't really matter, actually. Oh, but there's Raven's Crime and...
We got Raven's Crime and Haakon.
Ooh.
So, I was going to say that Michael would be able to respond in Kurt's draw step with the surgical, but waits until the main phase. And there goes the Haakon, and got one for the hand. That always feels bad when your opponent surgicals something that they don't know that's in your hand, and then they get to take that card too.
But Kurt's hand isn't looking too bad either. He's got 2 Lingering Souls, a Knight of Autumn, and is that Fiend Hunter? I can't tell the bottom card there.
Lingering Souls, Knight of
Oh,
Autumn,
that's a Knight of
and
Reliquary.
a Knight of Reliquary.
Yep. So he's still got a decent hand.
So a lot of 3-drops.
It is, but he is casting Life from Room, so unless Mike has another surgical, Kurt should be getting his 3rd land by casting his Life from the Loom right now. The scary part is with Life from the Room and the Dredge, he can make that Knight of Reliquary very large.
You can't surgical all their lands.
Yep. Especially in Modern when you only have most lands as a chew of outside of fetches.
Alright, it seems like Michael maybe kept this mulligan on the strength of the disruptive cards. Is missing green mana right now.
Kurt's going with the safe play.
Feels like maybe Kurt is trying to incentivize Michael to use the graveyard interaction before they play something like Knight of the Reliquary and really try to get those lands in the graveyard.
Though he did draw another Life from the Loam, so he can keep the engine going. But he also could just start dropping, more Lingering Souls, because I doubt Michael brought in a card like Damnation.
And it would, if just playing out the souls makes Michael deal with a lot of permanents, and traditionally that's why one would play something like Abzan over Jund, is when you think Lingering Souls is really good in the format, because it's very much a mirror breaker. Okay, we have a Brutality for Kurt cast with an Escalate. It's going to do a Bad Duress and a Gain Drain. 2
Assassin's Trophies, Liliana Veil, Fatal Push, Kalidas, and 2 Trackers. That is a rough hand. I think at Kurt's hand he just takes the Fatal Push.
That is a castable card, and Lily isn't great in this situation, even if Michael's able to draw into the land.
Ooh.
Takes an Assassin's Trophy. Interesting.
Would you agree with me that he probably should have taken Fatal Push since he's still missing that green source?
I feel like taking Fatal Push is sort of like the level 0 play there, because that's kind of the only castable card in the hand right now. Maybe Kurt has a lot of 3-drops that they want to resolve. But I do think that the Fatal Push was probably what I would have taken.
Yeah, because at least that's the trophy. You're also getting that land. Until he gets to that Kalidas, I think he's stuck. Oof. Well, that's not too bad, actually. I think he was really hoping to see another land there.
I'm going to get a Lingering Souls flashback.
Yeah, I think at this point, really, until he gets to Kalidas, I think Kurt's just gonna keep casting Lingering Souls and just go for the race here.
And also those Souls tokens when they die are not gonna make zombies with Kalidas.
Exactly.
And we're gonna get a Fatal Push on Spirit token. Oh, yeah. That's gotta feel good if you're Kurt.
Yeah. If you guys didn't hear that, Mike said he's gonna cry a little bit and pass his turn there. He knows he's in a bad situation, because I think even at this point, if he gets his 3rd land, he's so far behind. I'm not sure what he can really do unless he has a Damnation.
Alright, Kurt's going for the activation of the Shambling Vent, perhaps to use all their mana and not expose anything else to potential graveyard hate. I kind of like casting the other Lingering Souls in this situation.
Yep. Raymond's Crime's not that great of a card.
Now, with your opponent down to 10, I want to put as many things as possible onto the battlefield right now.
Yep, I think he's going with Lingering Souls this time.
And
Oof. That's
Michael just shows that, oh, I drew this other uncastable card, even though you already knew I had one. And a Lingering Souls cast, so got some more Spirit tokens. Got a 2-turn clock going on right now.
Yeah, I don't think anything's going to get him out of him at this point.
I think this is also just showing, even though Michael mulliganed to 6 cards, kept a 6 ahead, some graveyard interaction, but graveyard interaction itself is never good enough against synergistic decks. You also need to be able to apply some pressure, and Michael is never able to draw the land to cast the spells to apply that pressure. Although the cards that he did have wouldn't even have been that much pressure against 2 Lingering Souls and a Knight.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Oh,
that's a lot of Liliana the Veils that Michael had there.
If he got the 3rd land with the Last Hope, I think it would have been a manageable matchup.
Yeah, Last Hope would be a very strong card against those Lingering Souls for sure. Okay, we're going to take a quick break right now and cruise the room, see what everyone else is playing, maybe come back for a little interview if that works out, and we'll see you here in a couple minutes.
Hey everyone, this is Tim Chan. I'm here with Kurt Wakeling, who was just on camera with the Haakon Pox deck. We're going to do a quick short interview while Travis scouts out a couple decks for next round. So how are you feeling, Kurt?
Uh, Pretty great. That was some fun games. The deck worked, so that was fun. Overall, it's fun. Yeah.
So the obvious question is, what made you decide to build this deck?
Well, Four Color Loam is my favorite deck in Legacy. There's not really a straight port to Modern of that, and I saw Jeff Hooglin play this deck on stream one time, and kind of it tickled my fancy. I like Knight of the Reliquary. I like Life from the Loam, so I started tinkering with it, and it's pretty close to the list that he presented. I've made a few changes, and um, not that many. Mostly meta calls like mainboarded Bajuka Bog, and there's some sideboard changes. But overall, I just like playing grindy decks with Life from the Loam and Knight of the Reliquary.
So big conversation that Travis and I had during your matches were, because yours is a more mid-range graveyard interaction type of deck. So versus other decks like Is It Phoenix or Dredge, your deck's a bit slower. So like we saw game 2, you end up scooping to two surgical extractions. So how do you handle with all the anti-graveyard hate deck with how much your deck interacts graveyard wise?
Hope you dodge it. That was that decision I made to scoop was mostly time based because
Okay.
I figured I could probably dig for like Lingering Souls or something and win, but he had a Liliana active and my whole hand was Haakon Stronghold Scourge at that
Yep.
time, so I kind of just called that one. But
That's fair.
yeah, it's just kind of hope to dodge it.
So your sideboard is it kind of like Dredge where it's a lot of anti-graveyard hate cards, or is it more? I guess can you explain your sideboard choices? Because the only cards we saw at least were maybe Assassin's Trophies and Abrupt Decays. Can you explain your sideboard choices?
Yeah, I brought those in mostly just for more interaction. He was playing Black and Rock, which presents not too fast of a clock, but I wanted ways to get rid of like his tireless trackers and Goifs and nameless inversion. Sometimes they get a little bit big, and if you don't have an active Haakon, you can't inversion several times to get rid of them. But for the rest of the sideboard, it's there's more cards to shore up combo matchups. Collective Brutality helps with that. Stony Silence is for multiple things, and then obviously I didn't bring in either of those. And then there's like a few random fun ofs, like a Dark Blast that helps against
Okay.
kind of white weenie decks and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, thanks for the interview, and good luck out
Yeah.
there for the rest of the night.
Cool.
So,
Thanks, Tim.
yeah.